The movie opens in the bustling downtown of Taipei, where a beautiful young girl named Lucy is having a conversation with her boyfriend Richard. The duo is standing just outside the five-star Regent Hotel, and they look extremely shabby. That is because they were partying hard until late in the morning. In fact, Lucy met Richard for the first time only a few weeks ago, and that was in a club too. Currently, this new couple seems to be having an argument about something. Richard is holding a grey suitcase and, rather suspiciously, a pair of handcuffs along with it. He wants Lucy to go into the Regent Hotel lobby and deliver the suitcase to someone named Mr. Zhang. He says it contains simple documents and claims the whole task will barely take 2 minutes. However, Lucy has no interest in delivering anything for anyone. She even asks why Richard won't do it himself if the work is so simple. Richard makes up an excuse, saying he has been in and out of the hotel several times in the past few weeks. Lucy immediately points out that it shouldn't matter how many times he has visited, as long as he has a valid reason to go in. She takes his stupid hat off, revealing that he looks like a greasy bastard underneath. Upon hearing this, Richard finally accepts that he isn't on the best of terms with Mr. Zhang, which is why he wants her to go in. Lucy once again declines, saying she is extremely hungover and has an exam to study for. An increasingly desperate Richard reveals that he gets $1,000 to deliver the briefcase. If she goes in and hands over the briefcase for him, he will pay her $500. Upon hearing this, Lucy realizes that there must be something important in the briefcase. Nonetheless, she declines. But just as she's walking away, Richard does something unexpected. He grabs her hand and handcuffs her wrist to the briefcase. An enraged Lucy asks him to open the handcuffs, but he reveals that the key is with Mr. Zhang. With no other option left, Lucy walks into the hotel and heads straight to the reception. She awkwardly asks to meet Mr. Zhang, and the receptionist promptly relays the information to Mr. Zhang through the phone. The receptionist then asks for her name, and instead of giving a straight answer, she says Richard sent her with a briefcase. It is obvious that she doesn't want to give them any personal info, but the receptionist just won't let it go. She eventually gives in and says her name is Lucy. This is when several things go wrong at the same time. Richard, who was hanging by the hotel's main entrance, is shot dead on the spot. He hadn't been in Game of Thrones yet at this point, so he wasn't famous enough to make it through the first scene. A shocked Lucy looks around in disbelief, only to notice 4 huge and dangerous-looking men approaching her. They soon arrive at the front desk, bribe the receptionist to keep his mouth shut, and drag Lucy into the lift with them. Moments later, the men take her to the top floor, where Mr. Zhang's office is located. Lucy immediately notices 2 bloodied corpses on the floor and can't help but throw up. Mr. Zhang, whose hands are covered in blood, soon comes out and begins talking to his men in Korean. Lucy has no idea what he is saying and desperately tries to explain her side of the story. However, Mr. Zhang calmly calls one of his men on the phone and asks him to act as a translator. He writes down a number on a piece of paper, which he explains is the code to open the briefcase. Mr. Zhang then walks to the next room and asks his men to arm themselves with guns and shields. It is obvious that he doesn't trust Richard and thinks the briefcase might contain explosives. Through the translator, he offers Lucy 2 choices: open the briefcase or die. The poor woman cautiously opens it, only to find 4 plastic pouches filled with a strange blue powder. Mr. Zhang then returns to the room alongside a drugged-up man. The junkie is made to sit in front of Lucy and forced to snort some of the blue powder. Barely a few seconds later, He briefly convulses and then starts laughing maniacally. Mr. Zhang has seen enough and shoots the junkie in the head. He then turns his attention to Lucy and offers her a chance to work for him. Confused and scared, she refuses, but before she can say another word, one of Mr. Zhang's men knocks her out with a swift punch. Elsewhere in Paris, a neuroscience professor, Professor Norman, is giving a lecture on his latest research. He claims that the average human only uses 10% of their brain capacity. The only living beings that have greater usage than humans are podcasters. At least, that's what they think. It's actually dolphins. These shrewd creatures use 20% of their brain capacity, allowing them to map their surroundings and communicate with sonar waves. The scene shifts back to Lucy, who wakes up in a hotel room. She has been stripped down to her lingerie, and there is a blood-soaked bandage around her stomach. After a while, Lucy is taken to a huge room where Mr. Zhang and a British doctor are waiting for her. They are soon joined by 3 other men who seem to have been abducted just like Lucy. The British man explains that a bag of a drug called CPH4 has been forcibly sewn into each of their intestines. They will act as drug mules and transport these bags to Europe. He adds that if they refuse to do so, their families will suffer horrible fates. Furthermore, he reveals that CPH4 is a highly valuable synthetic drug. It is expected to become the next big thing in the underground market. Following this, all 4 drug mules are taken to separate locations. Lucy is held captive and chained in a room for the time being, guarded by 2 men. One of them tries to put his hands under her shirt. When that extra came to work today, he did not know he'd be touching Scarlett Johansson's boobie. When Lucy smacks his hand away, the thug loses his calm. He starts kicking her in the abdomen, right around the region where the CPH4 bag is placed. This causes a large amount of the drug to be released into her bloodstream. Suddenly, Lucy's body starts to be thrown all over the room on its own. She is lifted up to the ceiling, only to fall back to the floor within a few seconds. Back at the lecture, Professor Norman explains that if humans can access 20% of their brain capacity, they may be able to control every cell of their own body. If humans manage to access 40%, they may be able to control other people's thoughts and manipulate matter as they wish. Upon hearing this, a curious student asks, what would happen if humans could access 100%? It's an obvious question, but Norman acts like it's the best question he's ever heard. He thinks about it for a while and replies that he has no idea. When the scene shifts back to Lucy, we see that she is well awake, her eyes glowing blue, and sitting up straight as if nothing happened. A thug comes to check on her, but she suddenly traps his arm with her thighs. She knocks him out in the blink of an eye and steals the key as well as his gun. Lucy then heads outside and swiftly kills all the remaining thugs. Once everyone guarding her is dead, she sits down and devours whatever food she can find. She then notices she's been shot in the shoulder, but it doesn't affect her movement. Having access to your brain turns you into the Terminator. Next, she comes out of the building and sees 2 taxi drivers. She asks if one speaks English, and he says no. So she puts a cap in his ass. She then turns to the other and says, "What about you, you little expletive?" He says yes, and he takes her to the hospital. On the way to the hospital, Lucy feels something strange in her body because she is able to hear people's conversations from a distance very clearly. They soon arrive at the hospital, where she can read the Taiwanese signs clearly as if they were written in English. She then enters the operating theater, where doctors are conducting brain surgery on a man. However, Lucy shoots the patient after looking at the scans, saying they wouldn't have been able to save him anyway, then naming a bunch of scientific things she's definitely never heard of before. Having access to your brain turns you into Bill Nye. Lucy then forces the doctor to remove the bag of drugs from her stomach. While they are doing so, she calls her mother on the phone and says that she can feel everything: the space, the air, the rotation of the earth, and the deepest parts of her memories. Her mum says, "Oh boy, she's high again." Lucy says she remembers what her breast milk tasted like. Her mum says, "Time to go." She also tells her mother that she loves her very much before hanging up the call. Shortly afterward, the doctors manage to remove the bag of drugs and are told by Lucy that it contains CPH4. The chief surgeon then reveals that natural CPH4 is produced in tiny quantities by pregnant women during their 6th week of pregnancy. It provides energy for the fetus to develop, so he is surprised that Lucy has survived this far with such a large amount of the drug in her system. Next, Lucy returns to Mr. Jang's hotel, where he is relaxing in his room, getting tattooed and facialized. She immediately kills his bodyguards and assaults him by stabbing knives into both of his hands. She's really feeling the drugs now, so she's looking around like a new person, using her newfound abilities. Lucy telepathically extracts the locations of the 3 remaining drug mules from his memory. She then leaves Mr. Jang alive, but he's mad that she used his brain like a drone camera. He does an angry shriek. After a while, Lucy goes back to her apartment and meets her roommate, Caroline. She borrows her laptop and begins viciously researching everything about her current condition. She's opening tabs at light speed like a 10-year-old discovering Fortnite Rule 34 for the first time. Having access to your brain makes your computer faster. This leads her to find Professor Norman, whose research on human neurons may be the key to saving her. Lucy immediately contacts Professor Norman and reveals what she is experiencing. She explains that she has reached 20% brain capacity, which has made her both ruthless and devoid of emotion. To prove her point, she manipulates electronic waves, projecting her live video onto the TV in Norman's hotel room. After chatting for a while, they agree to meet in 12 hours. Before leaving her apartment, Lucy tells her roommate Caroline that her kidney and liver will soon be damaged unless she makes significant lifestyle changes. Meanwhile, Lucy's strange behavior at the hospital has spread through the media, so she changes her hair color and style before boarding a flight to Paris. During the flight, she contacts Interpol officer Pierre Del Rio and provides all the information needed to find the remaining 3 drug packets, leading to the swift capture of the drug mules. While researching her condition furiously on 2 computers at once, Lucy is asked by a flight attendant to turn off her laptops, but she ignores the request and instead asks for champagne. Unfortunately, the champagne causes her body to begin disintegrating. Lucy runs to the bathroom, where her body starts to turn to dust. To stave off her disintegration, she snorts the remaining CPH4, which restores her, but she passes out shortly afterward. Lucy wakes up in a hospital room in Paris, surrounded by Pierre, police officers, and doctors. She gets up, leaves the room, and makes everyone in the lobby, except Pierre, pass out. She removes the bullets from Pierre's gun and demands to be taken to the hospital where the drug mules were secured. During the drive, Lucy uses her powers to track phone signals in the city and overhear a conversation from Mr. Jang's top henchman, who is on his way to the hospital. When Lucy arrives, and his men are already there and have begun cutting out the drugs from the mules. As they try to leave with the drugs, Lucy, now operating at 60% brain capacity, uses her powers to move them around without touching them, creating invisible barriers and even freezing G. She retrieves the drugs and leaves the hospital with Pierre, who reluctantly follows her after a kiss. Mr. Jiang, noticing Lucy in a police car, orders his men to follow. Lucy and Pierre meet with Professor Norman and his colleagues at a laboratory, where Lucy begins to reveal everything she has learned. Mr. Jiang and his men infiltrate the lab, starting a shootout with the security guards. Inside, Lucy discusses time and humanity's perception of it. She urges them to inject her with the contents of all 3 remaining bags of CPH4, knowing that her body cannot sustain this level of brain activity. As her brain power rises to 70%, Lucy's body transforms into a fluid-like black substance that spreads over computers and electronic objects. It becomes clear that Lucy is downloading her knowledge into these systems. She begins manipulating matter, erasing everything in the lab and leaving the scientists standing in a white void. Lucy then transforms the electronic objects into a next-generation supercomputer. Meanwhile, Mr. Jiang, desperate to reach her, orders G to use a rocket launcher to blow open the lab's door. However, Lucy manages to transfer her consciousness to Times Square. Using her powers, she embarks on a journey through space-time, starting from early 20th century New York and eventually reaching the beginning of time, witnessing the Big Bang. Just as Mr. Jiang enters the lab and shoots at her, Lucy, now at 100% brain capacity, disappears. Her physical body integrates into the fabric of space-time, leaving only her clothes and the supercomputer behind. A frustrated Mr. Jiang is about to shoot the remaining scientists when Pierre enters and shoots him, killing him on the spot. As the movie ends, the supercomputer disintegrates into a black flash drive, which Professor Norman grabs. He realizes that it contains all the secrets of the universe. A devastated Pierre asks where Lucy is, and just then, he receives an SMS that reads, "I am everywhere." The screen fades to black, teasing a possible sequel where a new character, Gen Alpha, the Rizzler, discovers the power of the drug. The video ends with a call to subscribe, turn on notifications, and leave a like to support the channel.